That's why humanity needs a great awakening.
And with that, I'll say hello, everybody. Welcome back to Metaphysical Egypt. I'm Allan Peoples with Patricia Awion-Lehman, and let's talk about humanity's great awakening.
Let's. Hi, Allan.
Hi.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, episode 39. How cool. On the far left here, I have this amazing image. It's haunting, and it just always draws me in. It's at Abydos, and it's back in this Sokar chamber, which is all about basically the resurrection. And we've talked so much about the resurrection of Osiris, and then it becomes resurrection stories in all the dogma around the world. It's always about this moment of resurrection, and we have to think about that. Are they talking about the resurrection of a god, a force of nature? Well, if it's a force of nature, which is what we've been saying, then it's a force of nature within the cycles. They're talking about something that's happening to us, to everyone, in this perception of reality, of energy in movement. That's what this is. That's what experiencing time and space is. And so this resurrection, as told, as I said, in so many different ways by so many different mythologies and dogma, religious dogma, and stories and written in caves and in temples all over the world. And you have to think, wow, this is much, much bigger. And it points to a point in our perception of a physical reality when we go through a resurrection. And what exactly does that mean? It's a huge transformation. And the things we've been talking about, our last couple episodes, we've been talking about all this, the solar cycles, what's happening with the sun and how it's affecting us. And these are not two separate things. This is, this beautiful, incredible patterning of nature, this game board that we're on, everything is connected and everything works in sync. And our great awakening is powered by the solar cycles. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How this relates to the mythology, and we're going to bring up things we've seen before. But again, this is, if you see these things over and over again, you begin to understand that it's a dynamic that exists in every pattern within our bodies, within the cycling of, the forces of nature that create our perception of a physical body, and within the earth itself, and within our universe, with our galaxy, and our multiverse, and everything that comes together to form and give us, again, this game board on which we are able to experience life.
Right, and it's all fractal patterns.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
In a nutshell, and there we go again. So the figure on the far left is Nefertum, and what I love here, is that expression is so serene and so beautiful. He has the hawk. I'll show you a better picture, but he has the hawk on his head. That's his crown. Normally he'll have the lotus, but what you see is he actually has his left hand holding the eye, right? The Wadjet eye, the eye of Horus at his heart. And we're talking about heart-based consciousness. And this is what ushers in this great awakening. It's a new seed of consciousness. And the picture in this, go ahead, Allan.
I was going to say, and of course, Nefertum is created after the drama of Sekhmet and Ptah. Nefertum is the harmony of the atom, as we said before.
Awesome. Exactly. And Sekhmet are, in fact, 2 episodes again, our title was Sekhmet Roars.
Right, where we linked Sekhmet to the solar cataclysms that our Earth is facing.
Well, exactly. Sekhmet is this great mother who opens a space for healing. So she roars, she rages, she begins to destroy the physical perception of Earth. So we see the fire and brimstone, the volcanoes, the earthquakes, all of these things, which are just an illusion. And at any rate, she she does all this, and Ra, right? She is an eye of Ra. She is the eye of Ra, that he throws down to earth when he sees that we're out of Ma'at. And when Ra sees what she's done, he goes, oh no, this is not what I wanted. He's upset because we're not revering the forces of nature. And this is why he takes his eye, which is the nurturing eye of Hathor, and it becomes the raging eye, the fierce rays of the sun, as Sekhmet. But she scourges the earth, and she's bloodthirsty with rage. And so Ra, afraid that he'll she'll destroy his great creation. He turns the river. The Nile River, the waters to wine. And she thinks it's blood, and she drinks it, gobbles it, drinks it all, and becomes drunk and passes out for that moment of silence, the pause, for 3 days. And when she opens her eyes, she sees Ptah. And as you said, Allan, he wears the blue cap, the primordial waters. He is basically, he is the thing that comes from out of the blue to become form. He is the process of us becoming form again after the destruction. And this is incredibly important because nothing happens. We don't die. We don't go away. There is no death. The Egyptians had no word originally for death. These words come later as part of the propaganda of the priests, whom Hakim called the Hanuti. He projects back into form, and she sees him and falls madly in love, and she gives birth to Nefertum, which is the new seed. She ushers in the healing by giving birth from her womb to the seed of heart-based consciousness. And this is the great
which is the eye that he's holding at his chest.
That's exactly right. So he's bringing consciousness back to the heart. Isn't that beautiful? So truly beautiful way of presenting something that would be hard. They're leaving this as symbolism for us to know what's going to happen at this moment in time. And they're leaving it for a humanity that devolves into a left brain consciousness that's lost touch with all of these principles. And they had the foresight and the knowing and the wisdom to know that this is where we would be. And so they leave us these beautiful writings. It's basically music, that is, solid music that falls into form, into symbolism and structure. And it's here for us to unravel the clues and to bring it back into our consciousness again, and to know what it is we're about to walk through.
Just as a little aside, last night was the closing ceremony of the Olympics in Paris, and they had a scene where I guess they would have to call it Lucifer, this being of light, descends from the ceiling onto the map of the earth with all of these falling angles of light, these spotlights that are following it down.
That's how it all began. But that was before. We were those angels of light. I love how you described that. We are the angels of light that fell into form. And now all of that is, we've talked about this in several podcasts. Everything has to reverse and turn. We are upside down and backwards. We need to reverse and become that space in between. We're moving from one perception into another.
And that's exactly what's going to happen, you think, in that moment of stillness, those 3 days of silence after the Sekhmet finishes roaring and while she's drunk and asleep.
Oh, of course that's what's going to happen. This is when we wake up. This is the moment we literally see the light. We come out of Plato's cave. Wow. And suddenly we don't even know what we're experiencing. But it's not the end. It's not the goal. We still have to work our way back. But I'm going to present all of these concepts and ideas. It's not like you go from the lowest possible place humanity can fall to and suddenly come out and say, wow, I made it. I'm at one with source. It can't possibly work that way, as much as we'd like to think so. And I think this is something a lot of people may misunderstand or mistranslate, that, this is our moment of great awakening. Well, it is, but this is the sun dawning. It's just the beginning.
Oh, so it's not our destination. It's really the beginning of the journey.
It's the beginning of a whole new journey of perception, but it's the journey back up again. This is the fun, We were descending into hell, right? As said by the Bible. Hell on earth. We were descending into the state of separation consciousness just got worse and worse. And now, we're in a state where we don't even know what's real anymore. We really do know it's an illusion, but it's our illusion. We created it. But now is the time that we turn that around and we begin to know again, from our hearts. The heart knows. The mind, it's the trickster. It's always going to get us into trouble. But so anyway, we talked about Alice and the portal and all those beautiful things, and how when she falls through the portal, time and space become warped. But I saw this wonderful meme and I thought, wow, it's so cool. The secret, dear Alice, is to surround yourself with people who make your heart smile. I like to say, make your heart sing. It's then and only then that you'll be in Wonderland. And this is a key for us right now as we're walking through these times. What do we seek out? How do we want to be? I think part of ushering in a whole new perception of reality is to be at peace, to be in joy, despite what's happening around us. And that means surrounding yourself with people that are bright and alive and excited about being here now. And you walk through these experiences together, and it makes it that much easier. We need to nurture each other. We need to remember we are all connected as one. We have to, like Osiris, we've shown it many times. When Horus says, Osiris, turn over and rise, we don't get to rise until we turn over. We have to change our perspective. Oh, there it is again. I just love this image. So yes, Allan, you're way ahead of me. The harmony of the atom, the seed of our awakened cells, and the gateway to the divine. We're just going to walk through this new gate, but we're going to have a new seed in our hearts, a new seed in our consciousness. We're going to begin to awaken senses we forgot we had. We're going to begin to feel. It's happening now. And what's ushering that in is these big solar storms that are happening. We're having them this week. And I'm going to talk about the week of May 10th in just a moment, when we had all those direct X-class flares, one right after the other, and how it affected the Earth, and more importantly, how it affects our consciousness. It is weakening our magnetic field, and we're getting more of this galactic radiation, which sure, it's gonna wreak havoc with our physical bodies, but it's going to awaken our senses, and we're going to remember that we are not our bodies. And knowing this is going to make that process a whole lot easier. So welcome all these new senses that you have, your ability to know things before they happen. That's you, folks. You are waking up. Start to trust in your heart. Start to trust in your gut. This is a wonderful quote from the Enigma. It's called The Enigma of the Seed Atom and Kundalini Energy. And it says the seed atom acts as a focal point, drawing in divine energies and distributing them throughout the physical and etheric bodies. The seed atom holds within it the potential to attain the divine state, and it is through its awakening that this potential is realized.
Just like, when Veda Austin puts the seed in the water and you get the imprint of the entire flower, right? The fractal imprint of everything is contained within each part of it.
That's exactly great reference,
Mm.
because that's exactly what it is. When we start to awaken these senses, we have the choice to shut them down or to realize that these are seeds that are awakening within us. And the potentials are huge and vast if we allow ourselves to play with it, experiment with it, let
Well,
it
just
grow.
imagine that level of understanding, like to just think about a situation and see every possible realization of that and then choose the best one for you. Hmm.
Well, exactly. And trust yourself. Trust your gut. Don't overthink it. We need the mind. Oh gosh, we need our minds. But we can't rely on them for all of our decisions, all of what we choose to do. Our heart knows, our heart feels.
Hmm.
And we've been our hearts have been shut down for so long that we've lost faith in them. But once we awaken them, I've played with this a lot in the last few decades, and it's amazing the miracles, what we would call miracles, I've been able to create by just going with what my heart says, even though my mind screams and says this is ridiculous,
Hmm.
Patricia, and along with my parents and friends and everyone else. What are you thinking? But I wasn't thinking. I was following my heart.
Yeah, you were playing by the rules of nature. That's what happens
This
when
is
you
exactly what happens.
when you go
Everyone,
with the flow rather than fight against the current. Hmm.
exactly, exactly. This is the time to start playing with that. Um, the
Well, we've
process.
been told our whole lives to discount, most of us have anyway, to discount that internal voice, that intuition, those things that tell us that the authority is wrong and we actually know better.
Well, we've not only been taught that; it's been driven into us. And in another podcast, I'm going to talk about more about these things. But the old witch hunts. Remember when we were in Scotland?
Hmm.
And we learned what they were doing to these women that were using nature, and herbs and healing, and that they really knew the secrets, the wise women, and they were labeling them as witches.
I
And
was just talking about this exact thing with a friend of mine yesterday about midwifery specifically and how the domain of childbearing and bringing a child into the world used to be exclusively a female endeavor, right? And we had witch trials. All these women were, sent to death, and men took over.
this is the whole. Unfortunately, I can't see you when we do these podcasts.
I
I
know.
all I see is my screen. So if it seems like we're jumping in on each other, it's simply because I can't see Allan. Um, but no, you're absolutely right. And this is that whole patriarchal paradigm. I'm not in judgment. I try not to be in judgment um, about some of these things. I mean, the witch hunts, yeah, there are no excuses. But this is how separation consciousness works, and it's going to be a lot harder to get back to unity consciousness, I think, than it was to fall into the state where we can be controlled by agendas that create fear. And this was part of those witch hunts, Alan, because this is what they did. They created fear. They killed the witches. And so the fathers wouldn't even allow the daughters, who were also trained in these healing arts and these, nature's ways, to practice. And that's when the knowledge was cut
Hmm.
off. And this was all over the world. It wasn't just Scotland. This was, they went out to all of, and I say they, but it's so many different bodies. I don't want to target, Romans, the English, Spanish. It was in all these indigenous cultures worldwide, and stamped out the ancient knowledge. This was by design. It happened here in Egypt with the Romans. They destroyed magnificent structures. They destroyed the knowing, because you can't control the way that our system controls us if we know the truth. We don't need anyone to interpret our relationship with God.
Hmm.
It's a direct connect. It always has been. We don't need We don't need priestesses and gurus. We don't need anyone as a conduit between us and Source. That was the first major lie. That's what Akhenaten was rebelling against, because that's what was happening to him with the priests of Amun. They were taking the power away from the throne and away from the people. And
And he
he,
was a priest, and he knew what they were doing.
exactly,
And he said,
exactly.
"Not on my watch."
That's exactly right. His brother was supposed to be next in line, but his brother passed away, and suddenly he, who was trained to be a high priest, who has all the knowledge, is promoted to being the king, the pharaoh. And there was no way he was going to give up what he knew to be true, for a priesthood that was lying to the people.
Wait, so are you saying that Akhenaten's Aten worshipping version of the ancient Egyptian religion was actually what the priests believed, and he put it out there for the public, and what they were putting out for the public was actually a fairy tale story?
100%.
So how do we today, 2, 3, 4,000 years later, tell the difference?
Well, this is what I've been doing, to be honest with you. And unfortunately, this isn't what this podcast is about, but we will. And I do have one coming where we talk about the Hanuti, when this happens, when our truths begin. It's not just happening today, folks. We didn't just wake up and realize somebody's been lying to us. It's been happening for thousands of years. And that's all part of reflection of separation consciousness. So this is why, I struggle, because I sometimes I'm not so popular when I start talking about the priestesses and the whole idea of the temples, because there was a time when the temples were open to everyone, and they all had relationships with the netters, deep, deep relationships with the netter, the forces of nature. And yes, they would call it Wajid, or they would call it, Isis, or whatever name. Some would be more attracted or be more devoted to a certain aspect of nature as a holder of energy for that within, within the dynamic of the whole, because they worked, everyone was equal. As Hakim would say, they were all just sachet. They all could feel the natures, and so they worked together in unison. That's what how it all began, with unity consciousness. And then suddenly, as we begin to fall into separation consciousness, and fully in the age of Taurus, and age of Taurus is 6,000 years ago. So you can see now that, we're looking at temples that are sometimes 3,000, 2,000, 4,000 years old. This is after we fall into form and into separation consciousness. So most of what we have learned since that time is not the truth. So when we go back to the ancient texts and the ancient beliefs, I'm not, and maybe I haven't made this clear before, but I'm not looking to tell you that what the priests wrote on the walls is the truth. We're actually saying, look between the lines, because they preserve the truth within the mythologies, within the symbols themselves speak volumes to us if we open our senses. But the stories that they tell us, that they mean. Remember, I said every glyph, every icon, every mythology has at least 7 levels of meaning. So we can take it at face value, what they tell us it means. And it's right, but it's not going to help us. It's not going to help you transcend stargates, or anything else you've been told that you should be seeking.
Right, it's not the entire story. There's
It's not
also
the entire
there's
story.
also the negative space. Nobody is paying attention to the other half, which
No,
is
they
the
haven't been
space in
told,
between.
which is the most important space. And we're living the illusion, the game board. So all that Allan and I have been doing is actually speaking to you about the real origin of what the symbolism means on different levels. And we can only do as much as we can comprehend. But like these seeds that we were just talking about, these are seeds of potential that we are planting in ourselves and hopefully planting in your consciousness to begin to allow us to awaken. In other words, when I started doing this and I was like, and I met Hakeem and everything that he talked about resonated with what I'd already studied, it was that ability to finally say, oh, wow. And then I'd walk in the temples and the temple walls would speak to me because I already had the seeds planted. And this is why we're saying right now that these seeds are being planted. This is the true star seeding. This galactic radiation that's coming in, this field from the center of the galaxy is coming in, and it's literally star seeding us with all this new information. If we choose to accept our mission and allow those potentials to grow within us, awaken our senses into, I think, the truth, which is something the truth, the word itself has no meaning anymore for so many of us. We're looking for the truth, and it seems so etheric and so out there somewhere, but I think this is our journey to it.
Well, once all the lies and misconceptions and falsehoods fall away, you're only left with the truth.
Well, this is it, and that's what our next journey is. So we're in that huge. This is why everyone chose to be here now. This is why we're all feeling this. We're anxious one day, fearful the next, euphoric the next. That's the awakening. It's like shedding a skin. It's like cracking open an egg. It's like it's painful and yet it's exciting. And it's funny because the next, we should get on with this.
Yeah.
But the next paragraph or whatever in this little quote is the process of transfiguration. This transfiguration, right? We're coming out of the cocoon, marks a merging of the individual with the universal one, leading to permanent self-realization. There's your truth. Upon passing this initiation, the seed atom may descend, but never below the heart chalice. See, that's the chalice. That's the Holy Grail we've been seeking. And it signifies the transcendence of material planes. So this is literally, it's not, we're not seeking to go through portals to other planets or anything like that. That's all the illusion of our game board. We want to move through a perception of the material, which is confining, and it's like being in that cave watching movies dance on the walls from reflected light. It's coming out and actually living. That's what we've wanted from the beginning, to actually experience what it's like to live in unity consciousness. And yeah, this is what Allan was talking about. Nefertum was the harmony of the atom. And Atum, if you remember at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about in the beginning, when creation begins, Atum is created as the atom. He is the complete one, and he's riding the sine wave, which is the ups and downs of separation consciousness. Mm-hmm. See, and I'm just having fun with you today to show you the symbolism that we've talked about and how it literally, it's everywhere here in Egypt. If you truly understand, it's all connected. The temples, the chambers, the sites are not separate little containers of knowledge. They're all connected with the same story. And although the stories migrate and change, and the icons and even the netters change and transform, it's still, they're always telling the same story because it can't be any other way. And I love this quote about quantum physics. It says that as you go deeper and deeper into the workings of the atom, you see that there is nothing there. It's all an illusion, right?
Yeah, it's
energy waves.
It's just magnetic fields.
Exactly. It says an atom is actually an invisible force field, a kind of miniature tornado which emits waves of electrical energy. Take it back further, you've got scalar energy, you've got the sea of primordial consciousness. That's what we're all seeking, gnosis, at least for a moment.
Mm.
And we might want to breathe out into another expression of reality.
Well, we have no sense of time during that moment of silence, so there is no movement. So we don't know how long, how long that lasts compared to how we think of time now.
Well, exactly. It is a blissful moment, total bliss of being totally connected. I mean, it is what we're all seeking, that total freedom of expression and freedom to just be, but I think the way it's described is how long can you just be without imagining something into a new reality?
Well,
You
it's a
know,
cycle, so you necessarily have to come back. We will fall into form again.
because we choose it.
Mm.
That's the key. We choose it. I always laugh, and I've said this before about people that say, "This is my last lifetime. I can't take it anymore. I went out." And
I think if you say that, it's definitely not your last lifetime.
no, you just nailed your own coffin shut. I'm teasing. But we all lined up to be here, and we can change how we experience this reality just by changing our attitude. And I know that to a lot of people that are suffering, that doesn't sound like a possibility. Um, but it is all part of our game board experience. And I'm not saying I don't have my moments of because we all do, and that's part of being on the sine wave, the roller coaster. And it is life. It is experiencing time and space, which is energy in motion, and it comes with emotion. That's what it means. We have emotions. Um, Walter Russell, he's my hero. I love, he says, this, I believe that there is but one thinker in the universe, that my thinking is his or her thinking, and that every man's thinking is an extension through God of every other man's thinking. And I therefore think that the greater the exhalation and ecstasy of my thinking, the greater the standards of all man's thinking will be. Each man is thus empowered to uplift all men as each drop of water uplifts the entire ocean. And I think we need to be cognizant of this because we do make a difference with every choice, with every thought, with every emotion that we have. If we're having a bad day, we can choose to take it out on everybody, or we can choose to turn it around. And although that seems hard sometimes, there is always something to appreciate. There's always some way of experiencing, that appreciation for something in your life that you can focus on instead of the things that aren't working.
Mm.
So what's happening? We're hearing about all kinds of things. We don't know what they mean, and I don't think the scientists know what they mean. Has been a measured major slowdown of Earth's inner core. And of course, the inner core, and again, this isn't even known, but it's
Mm.
believed to be made up of molten iron. And therefore, it would possibly drive the spinning of the Earth. But it's slowing down. And does this have an effect on the magnetic field? I think Ben Davidson says everything's solar driven. But is the sun's cycling its activity, is that what is slowing down the core? That makes a whole lot of sense to me. And this big field of galactic energy that's hitting our solar system right now, it's all in sync. It's the center of our galaxy breathing out this field of highly supercharged energy that's affecting our sun, which affects the sun is reacting and affecting every planet in our solar system.
Well, now I have a quick question. This emanation from the center of our galaxy, is it always happening and it's just that we're now moving into this area where we're being affected by it? Or is it cyclical bursts?
It's a breath. Everything breathes, expansion, inhalation, expansion, inhalation. And I believe it hits our solar system every 12,000 years. And this is why it's causing what's happening now is happening, and it happens within these 12,000 year cycles. But we also have, the events in between that happen every 3,000 and every 6,000 years, not nearly as having as great an effect as these 12,000 year events.
Right, and we've pointed out before that these 12, 6, and 3,000 years, they line up with the fixed signs of the zodiac.
Exactly.
The age of Leo, age of Taurus, age of Scorpio, age of Aquarius.
It's like you knew my presentation.
Oh, is that your next slide?
It's going to be very soon, and I love that, because see how your senses are awakening. You have known what in the last several podcasts now what I'm going to talk about before I do. And we don't. He doesn't. I don't give him anything ahead of time, so I just love it. But this again is from Ben Davidson, and he's showing. They're trying to tell us that mankind is driving climate change, and I've heard all kinds of things about wanting us to eat insects, and I don't want to go into everything, but it's not happening to us. We're not. I mean, we're not causing it. Whether we eat beef or insects or whatever, we're not causing this big, huge climate change. And these climate changes happen all the time on smaller scales. I mean, we talk about, oh my gosh, we get a snowstorm today, 6 inches in the Northeast, and people go crazy. I grew up in the Northeast, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. We regularly, we had big, huge 4-foot snowstorm blizzards. We didn't go to school for 3 or 4 days. All the time, and we had heat waves, and we had all those things. And then we went through a cycle where we didn't. And now, we begin to have different kinds of cyclical changes, migrations caused by weather changes. Egypt used to be lush and beautiful. Turkey used to be lush and beautiful in some areas. And then suddenly it becomes dry and desolate. This is expansion and retraction. It's breath. It's all breath of cycles at different time periods, and it's mostly driven by the sun. Strangely enough, we are in sync with solar cycles, and when people speak about the ancient cultures worshiping the sun, like a pagan god, it's such a misunderstanding of the truth, because they understood it so much better than we do. They understood that the sun was driving everything. And so it wasn't worship as it was, they were in reverence of the power of this great, beautiful ball in the heavens that was driving everything, all of our cycles. And they studied it, and they were astronomers, and they studied the stars and the precession, the circumpolar stars, because they knew that wherever the Earth's axis was tilted, it was telling us what time it was as far as our perception of reality. This is huge. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around it today, but this is what the ancients knew. And this is, again, right brain consciousness versus left brain consciousness.
Right. This is the level of understanding you have access to when.
You're absolutely right, Allan. And we did used to know some of this stuff, the Farmer's Almanac. I grew up with, people looking at the Farmer's Almanac. When do you plant? Do you plant with the new moon, right? Do you plant at this time? This is what the ancients knew. They watched the cycles of nature. They knew when to plant. They knew when not to swim in the sea because the sharks were going to bite. They knew how to watch and live in sync with nature. And I think this is what we need to get back to. So I said, I promised you this was coming. Do you remember that huge solar storm today? I remember Allan and I talking about it because we were literally zonked, and I felt it. My cats, my gosh, I couldn't touch them and their hair not stand on end and come up to meet my hand and spark me. Everything was sizzling. And this comes from hidden stargazers on social media. And this is a beautiful, she got it as a quote from NASA on Science. But listen to this. Scientists have just discovered that in addition to creating spellbinding auroras, and I'm sure you remember that, we were seeing auroras further south in Texas, and, it was just crazy. And we're still seeing some of these things happen. We're having a solar storm right now. The storm also made a new temporary ring of charged high energy particles encircling the Earth. Think about that. Earth is typically surrounded by two of these giant donut-shaped rings of particles called the Van Allen belts. But during the especially large solar storms, a temporary third belt can form sandwiched between the two permanent ones. So this new belt, which was discovered by NASA's Colorado Interradiation Belt experiment, could last months to years. What does that mean for us? Scientists are studying the data to better understand the belt and how long it might stick around. Stay tuned. What does that mean? Are we going to be, well, again, I don't want to even theorize. On the far right, I have a picture of Susan, Allan's and my friend, our geologist, who joins us on many tours, but she's also a good friend. She saw this last night. She wanted to see the Perseids, the falling stars in the sky, and she looked out and saw this. Isn't it beautiful? So the May 10th superstorms electrified Earth's atmosphere. So if our atmosphere is electrified, what do you think's happening to us?
Mm-hmm.
The geomagnetic superstorm of May 10th did more than spark widespread auroras. New data shows that it also electrified Earth's atmosphere. Fair weather electric fields jumped as much as 15% for 4 days after the storm. What's even more interesting is they found that the soils in the Earth, the soil was electromagnetized. So it affected plant growth, right? It affected the mycelium. It affected us and our neural networks, our health. We had all of this super. What happens with that? I think this is all part of the Great Awakening. Just a thought. So I have this quote. I've shared bits and pieces of this before. It's from Plato's Timaeus, and it speaks of Solon. But some of you know Solon's story. But this is spoken by a priest of Egypt to Solon, who Plato writes about later. And he says, "Oh, Solon, Solon, you Hellenes are but children. There is no old doctrine handed down amongst you by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age. And I will tell you the reason behind this. There have been and will be again many destructions of mankind, arising out of many causes, the greatest having been brought about by earth fire and inundation. Whatever happened either in your country or ours, or in any other country of which we are informed, any action which is noble and great, or in any other way remarkable, which has taken place, all that has been inscribed long ago in our temple records, whereas you and other nations did not keep imperishable records. And then, after a period of time, the usual education visits like a pestilence and leaves only those of you who are destitute of letters and education. And thus you have to begin over again as children and know nothing of what happened in ancient times, either amongst us or among yourselves."
Sorry to laugh. It's just.
Well, he's basically wrapping them on the hands. Hey guys, you're not leaving the truth for others to know in the future. You're not leaving it for your children or for your children's children. But Egypt did, and maybe that's why I'm so attracted to what I found in Egypt, because it speaks to my soul about things that I was born asking about. But he goes on to say, "As for those genealogies of yours which you have related to us, they are no better than the tales of children. For in the first place you remember one deluge only, whereas there were a number of them. In the next place there dwelt in your land, which you do not know, the fairest and noblest race of men that ever lived, of which you are but a seed or a remnant. And this was not known to you because for many generations, the survivors of that destruction made no records. Interesting.
Hmm.
And this comes from, oh boy, help me, Brahma Vaivarta
You're on your
Purana.
own.
I'll stop there. You guys can read it. But I love it because it basically is speaking to the same idea. Dost thou say there were other Indras, other Visvakarmans before ourselves, other palaces before mine? Indeed, yes, the youth answered. I have seen them. Moreover, I have seen the world arise and vanish again, like a tortoise's shell coming out of infinite ocean and sinking back. I was present at the dawn and twilight of the cycles, past counting in their numbers, nor could I count all the Indras and Viva Karmans, even the Vishnus and Brahmas, following one another without end. Eternal cycles. This was told all over the world, but I love it when you can understand some of the imagery that that we see. And I've seen this tortoise picture in so many places, and you see the Ouroboros, and you see the tortoise holding up the world. But it makes more sense when you understand what they're talking about. That we do. These are nature's cycles. Live in sync with them. Survive, speak, talk, tell the stories to your children. And we learn how to traverse the cycles, surf the patterns, and create it. We can usher in these new cycles with grace. It's a total different way. And this is this is what Allan was just talking about, and I said we were going to go there. Um, Driven by where the sun is in the cycles. This image from Kamambo, and I love this image. I have always been drawn to it.
This is Shu, right? With his wings.
It's Shu Hei. Your favorite is Hei.
Oh,
And
yes.
this
Eternity.
this is the version of both Shu and Hei. Shu being the atmosphere that separates heaven and earth, and Hei being the infinite cycles. And in one hand, he's basically holding the staff with the key of life, and the other is the sail, which is a symbol of air, atmosphere. And the Ankh is also representative of water, so it's air and water, which is Shu and Tefnut, that make up the atmosphere. And this is where the cycling happens, in the space in between heaven and earth, Geb and Nut. And so these cycles, these four icons represent, like you said, the four fixed signs of the zodiac, and they are our game-changing moments. And you can see Leo. I just love Leo, the winged lion, and he has four faces facing left and four facing right, east and west. This speaks to Herodotus's story. When he said that the priests of Egypt told him that the sun rose in the west many times, at least four times, and rose in the east at least four times. So again, we've spoken about this before, but I want to connect the dots. And again, you can't see and hear these things enough to really embody the knowing as your new seeds for creating a new consciousness. Underneath the lion, which represents Leo, you see the hawk of Scorpio. The higher aspect of Scorpio is the eagle or the hawk, Horus. That's the other half. This is the cycle we're moving into. And when we see Taurus, we fall into form. And the image you can't see is Aquarius. You can see 5 feathers. 5 represents change. There are people that think this is, and it would be happy if they stick with what they use. Happy is Aquarius. And he's normally dumping the 2 waters, which is basically what starts the inundation, which is the new cycle. We are there, folks. We are entering, and it happens at the beginning as we move out of Pisces and into Aquarius.
Right, and pouring the waters is also synonymous with releasing spirit from the electromagnetic container that we're encased in, right?
Yep, that's exactly it. Plato's cave, the container, the belief in the physical form that contains, we think We are just our bodies, but we're so much more. All of that is released, and we become our greatest potentials. Wow. Can you understand how powerful these moments are? It's just huge and beautiful. Now, we could talk for hours just about this illustration, and we have in the past, but you see the two eyes coming together. The sun and the moon come together to form one. This is what you see in the winged sun disk at the top. This is our great moment, the great pause, and the turning of the tides, reversal of spin, and we start this all over again. But next time we rise, Maya Angelou said it. We rise. I brought this in. This is a wonderful image of the Sippus of Horus that I took at a museum outside of Buto, which I went with a guest back in March 2023. It was wonderful. It was a private permission, but she has great, oh my gosh, this woman is amazing, has amazing memories of when she was a priestess of Wadjet at this site. But at any rate, this image shows us again these four seasons. Horus is mastering these energies of these four fixed signs, right? When you harness them, you bring everything back to center. He's standing on the crocodile's digestion of form, and above him is Bes, and of course, Bes represents our ecliptic pole.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we just talking about this again. We haven't seen these images, but we've seen others that we've talked about.
And the ecliptic pole being the center of our galaxy from which this
Cat's Eye Nebula. Yep.
Cosmic rays are emanating.
That's exactly right. This is you see how all the dots, everything falls into place if you can begin to unravel the clues of symbolism.
666.
Yeah, I did send this to Allan because it blew me away. This was a sketch done by Salvador Dali. And it's funny, my mom absolutely adored Salvador Dali. And she was an artist herself. My father was an artist, different kinds of artists. But she bought me a tarot deck that he designed. It actually has gold-lined cards. And it was one of my greatest gifts, very rare and hard to find. I think it was even used because they're not making them anymore. And I still treasure it. I still haven't. I told Allan I was going to open them up and start looking at the cards. But when I saw this, it just blew my mind. The first thing I saw, of course, was the mound, right? And it has the two stopwatches on it. And of course, one's right side up and one's, they're both upside down and backwards,
mm-hmm.
right? The numbers. But they're also reversed in relationship to each other, which I think is phenomenal. And of course, the clock is pointing to 6 or 12, right? So we're looking at, if you're talking about precession, it's literally going 6 ages and there's a reversal, and then 6 ages and there's a reversal. And so this is a way of understanding possibly where the number 666 comes in Revelations in the Bible, that it represents this fact that we begin at 6, we go to 6, we reverse, and then we go back, and it's always going back to 6 and reversing. And you see this in the Book of Gates and the Book of Hours in Egypt, that these are the really life-changing moments, 666. And it adds up to 18, which adds up to 9, which is, it's this number of continuance. 10 is completion. 9 always means to me, don't quit before the miracle.
What is the passage in Revelation about 666, the number of the beast, all that stuff?
Number of the beast, the number of apocalypse. But apocalypse, again, is misunderstood. It's a destruction and a beginning. It's a destruction of the old and the beginning of the new. And that's what this is all about. And what amazes me about this simple sketch is you have to look at it. Because first of all, it's cosmic. His title is called Cosmic Rays Resuscitating Soft Watches. Wow. So the sun ushering in a new cycle.
That's interesting.
This is Salvador Dali.
Yeah.
Dali had access to deep esoteric knowledge.
Hmm.
Now, not only that, there we see Don Quixote, right? Well, the horse and the figure, riding the horse, right? Then, if you look closely, I'm going to keep going further because there is so much in this that it just blows my mind. And you can see right here in this little rock is Dali's signature. But what we're looking at is a primordial mound, but it's also this gateway, stargate basically between the worlds. And don't miss the dragon over here. Here we've got Draco because
Hmm.
he's a part of this. He is this reference to the circumpolar stars, which maps out this entire watch clock in the sky. So yes, powered by solar cycles. We have our primordial mound, our world tree. See the tree, the branches coming out of that rock? It's kind of both. But if you look at these figures, there's one in this little hole in the shadow of the rock. There's your shadow of the rock. So you have night and day right here. You have your night cycle, which is the one we're just coming out of,
Hmm.
and you have your day cycle, right? Um, so these figures over here on the right, these little figures are all in yellow light. And you see it looks like a priest and he has a staff, and he's all bright and there's this little kid maybe following with him, right? So this is the daylight journey, right? We begin in the descending journey as the highest version. Well, actually, when we begin at the beginning of this cycle, we were the highest versions of ourselves. We were just coming out of pure, complete gnosis when we had risen into our highest form of self. And then we descend to where we are now. And if you look through that little hole in the rock, you see there's two shadowy figures coming. So in this, we begin the ascending journey as a mere shadow of ourselves. So we have fallen all the way down, but we're reversing and coming back. And this is our time to grow into the highest version of ourselves again.
Reminds me of the Fool card in the tarot deck.
Exactly, exactly. Um, yeah, time is a construct of conscious perception.
Hmm.
It doesn't hurt to remind ourselves of this. As conscious awareness migrates through cycles, our perception of time and space changes as well. Who knows what we're going to be able to create in the next cycle. And here we go again. This is Ra's the cat. He says, "I am the cat which fought near the Persia tree in Anu, Heliopolis, on the night when the foes of Nefertum." He is that highest being. That's in his highest state, right? Lord to the uttermost limit were destroyed. This male cat is Ra himself, and he was called Mao, of course, meow. Anyway, because of the speech of the Netter Sa, who said concerning him, "He is like Mao, unto which he hath made, therefore did the name of Ra become Mao." Budge, this is all from Walter Budge. Budge further states that he has killed Apophis, or Apep, the prince of darkness, who had taken the form of a monster serpent. Apep or Apophis was the Netter who embodied chaos, Iftet, and was thus the opponent of light and Ma'at. Where are we now? We are in a state of pure, right? We are in a state of pure chaos. I mean, just look at the news. We have so many contests, so many people at each other's throats over some of the most silly issues and over some very important issues. We all hear about the light and the dark and the good and the evil and the people ruling the planet, the elite, and it's just we put labels on everything, and everybody's we are in a state of chaos. And this monster serpent, this chaos, is the same serpent who was said to have tempted Eve. It is
Hmm.
the sign, right, or sin wave that marks life cycles with its peaks and nadirs related to our knowledge of good and evil. It is the duality that must exist if we are to vibrate. Breath is living beings. Mao cuts off the head of these eternal cycles, bringing all back into a moment of silence, right? So here's one telling of the story. I have a moon again. He's riding the serpent. Wow, this is great. Well, Mao comes around at the Persea tree and cuts the head off the serpent, the sine wave, and ends our chaos. Two more beautiful pictures. This is from the Book of Ani. The fight here referred to the first battle which the Netter of Light waged against the fiends of darkness at Anu, according to Budge, after which he rose as the form of the sun upon this world. A new day cycle dawns. So this is the new sun. So the old sun is what's creating all this chaos. Interesting. Think about it.
Mm.
Maybe all this solar radiation is really stepping up, our anxiety and the anxiety of everyone around us. This, when we see a lot of violence, when we have big solar flares, I notice people can drive like maniacs. We see some of the most amazing, crazy things happening. I notice these things. I see dog fights. I see, it just seems like we're all triggered, especially if we don't understand why we're feeling anxious.
Mm.
Another aspect associated with this netter is Mahis, is the male form of the lion. He's like the one. There's not a whole lot of male lions in Egypt. It's mostly lionesses. The Neterts, or the goddess energy. But he is a powerful solar god and protector of the innocent, depicted as a lion-headed man carrying a long knife or as a lion, sometimes related to Sekhmet, there we go, as her son. He too is associated with putting an end to chaos when we are out of Ma'at. So, like I said, many different stories talking about this moment in time. So as concerning the fight which took place near the Persea tree in Anu, which references to the slaughter of the children of rebellion when the righteous retribution was meted out to them for the evil which they had done. That sounds a little harsh, doesn't it? But it also encourages us to be cognizant of your choices. Are you creating chaos, or are you creating Ma'at, peace? I say we must end the chaos. But here we've seen these images of Horus, and he's killing the serpent, the dragon. This is again Draco. This is to stop the spin, to stop the chaos, to stop the roller coaster. We need a moment of silence, of pure bliss. Sounds really good right now. And this is also from that same museum near Buto, but it really tells the story beautifully. Some of the stories that Allan and I have been talking about. When Horus had grown up and become stronger, he demanded the kingship of his father. Thus the battle started and lasted. And what he's demanding, he's demanded the kingship of his father, whom Set had taken. So Set is, his father is Osiris, and Set kills Osiris. So Horus is battling Set. Set represents chaos, that is liquid light becoming form. Once you're pure, beautiful, divine light locked in form, the energy of Set is that light trying to escape for free expression again. And this is the anxiousness that we're all feeling. We come by it naturally. This is the Set within. This is our inner light wanting to shine. Why don't we just let it happen? Sounds easy, doesn't it? But thus the battle started and was said in some stories to last for 80 years. The two gods fought all over Egypt, and in a round of this conflict, Set took the form of the hippopotamus. And we've shown you these images at Edfu where we see Horus killing Set as the hippopotamus, which also represents the circumpolar stars as Epit or Taret. And Horus in the form of a falcon. Horus was often depicted stabbing a male hippopotamus on the walls of ancient Egyptian temples, while Isis is standing next to him. The tradition continued after that, and the forms of Horus changed, as well as the forms of evil and chaos. But he was always the avenger for his father, triumphing and controlling Set, chaos. On this remarkable stela, it's depicted a winged Amunnacht, a combination of Amun and Horus, wearing a double crown and accompanied by a lion, is shown while killing a snake. The depiction of the victory over evil continued beyond this dynastic period, where Horus appeared in the form of a knight wearing a double crown and riding a horse and killing an enemy, symbolizing evil. And this artistic tradition continued as well in Christian art in the iconography of the theme of saints killing a dragon. Doesn't get clearer than this. This is literally a picture of what was written in the museum. And this is well understood here, and it's just one element that we see of everything in ancient Egypt migrating into dogma, in Jewish dogma, in the Hebrew dogma, in the Christian dogma, and into mythologies all over the Mesopotamian and Turkey. This is, and I say stemming from Egypt, maybe it was better preserved in Egypt. I'm not saying everything started in Egypt, although Hakim always did with a twinkle in his eye. But these cultures, these tribes migrated all over the area and probably all over the earth. And we see these same dynamics, same stories, same cycles, all speaking to what's happening in our environment.
Now, like we said a long time ago, the constellation Draco is fixed in the northern part of the sky. Like, it doesn't move in our perception of the movement of the heavens.
It spins.
No, I mean, it doesn't rise and fall. It's
yes, right. The never setting stars is what they call them. So yeah, we always see it in the northern hemisphere, and on this planet right now, our society looks up to the northern hemisphere to define what time it is. And we use the circumpolar stars in the northern. We don't, nobody looks down to the southern pole. Does anybody know what the southern pole star is? We don't have one right now, but we do sometimes. And we actually mark it by the pole stars in the northern hemisphere because we're looking one direction. But Egypt has always said, look down, south is up.
So we should make that connection. Like the hippopotamus, Tauret, is synonymous with like the Big Dipper and Draco. She has Draco on her back, right? So we're talking about the same constellation. And when the hero, Horus, or the knight, is slaying the dragon, stabbing the hippopotamus or the dragon, they're stopping the spin of the earth.
That's right.
Which is chaos, as you said.
It's exactly right. And thank you for clarifying that, because I tend to just keep on going. But yeah, this is exactly right. All of it we see all over the world, it's speaking to this same dynamic. And look at all the dragons we see everywhere. And, the dragons and the serpents and, the big serpents, these are all speaking to this dynamic in the heavens. And when you understand it and you see it, it's almost, when you really start to see it, it's almost like, oh my gosh, why didn't I see this before?
And I know you're probably going to get to this, but on the walls of Edfu, as Horus is stabbing the hippopotamus is turning over in the different stages of this comic book telling of the story, and he's getting smaller and smaller as you're going.
Yeah, I don't have all the pictures this time. I think we did do it once before, but yeah, here's one picture. There's Horus, and unfortunately, there's been destruction. I'm not going to go into why we see the destruction, but this is Horus, and he's on his bark, and he's stabbing, as Allan pointed out, that is a small hippopotamus at the bottom. And
that little tiny figure in the lower left.
Exactly. But as you go through all the pictures on this huge wall, you see this hippopotamus, and he's spinning around. It's almost like he's doing little somersaults. because that's the spin of, as Allan again pointed out, that's the spin of the circumpolar stars in the heaven. And this is what he's killing and stopping. He's stopping the spin for a moment of silence. This is Horus's great feat. Now, this is at Edfu. Edfu is dedicated to Horus in his highest expression when he becomes one with the sun at noon for a moment of silence, right? That's pure gnosis. So Horus has got to be the one to kill the beast, chaos, so that we can have our moment of bliss, right? That near-death experience. Notice I said near-death.
Mm-hmm.
Because when all of this happens, we have a moment of bliss and silence and become one with everything that is. But we breathe back out again. This is so important to know.
It's not death.
It's not death. There is no death. And again, yes, dogma has that. Yes, even Egyptian dogma speaks to getting eaten by Ammit, the judgment scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the games of the priests. And I cannot say that loudly enough. The priests were using propaganda to promote their own harvestless jobs.
Some things never change.
Yeah, bring me money, offerings to the gods, and I will pray for you, and your soul might be saved. Where have we heard that before?
Mm.
And I don't mean to be sarcastic. This is all by design. This is how we fall into form, and we're challenged to wake up. That's part of the journey we chose. We're challenged to wake up from this, to stop turning to a power outside ourselves. We're told by all of these people that we need them to be our conduit to heaven. Heck no. Nobody can do it for you. This is the most important thing I think we can get across to everyone, is that this is your journey. You're responsible for your journey and your connection with your source and your higher self. And that higher self, that part of you that expresses so much more widely than this one that's locked in body, that self and this self are both at one-ment with everything that is. And we're just enjoying energy and motion.
Yeah, just like quantum physics.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell. And so this is another image. It's on the ceiling at Dendera, and it's that moment again. The last 12,000 years cycle, 12,000 years ago. This is the moment when Horus stops the bull of the heavens, right? It's that same expression. That's Epit. That's Charet. She usually, you see her with Draco on her back. She has got this. She's basically got this looped rope tie around the leg of the bull, right? That leg is the Big Dipper, right? And what's fascinating is the story is when Set and Horus were battling at one point, Horus grabs the leg of the bull, Taurus, and throws it, which is Set, and throws it across the heavens, and it gets locked inside the circumpolar stars, right? For eternity, that is Set contained in form.
Mm.
And there is your chaos. So he's killing the bull, right? And that's the chaos that begins the next cycle, which is the beginning of the cycle that we're in right now. This happens around Capricorn, right? Which is right behind Taret here. So what's interesting is this loop is what we use. The loop is actually the sign for H, which H is the double square that represents what separates.
Yeah, the separation between heaven and earth.
Hello, where we have time. It's also part of Hay, which represents time.
Yeah.
So you see how this all connects? It's mind-blowing. And oh, by the way, look at our chakras, our two waters within, forming those same loops, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's our Kundalini rising that stops the chaos.
And our double helix DNA.
Right. We harness the two sides of self, like Horus harnesses, right, those four seasons or those four beasts. He transmutes his polarity to come back to center. This is the journey within that we're seeing on the game board without, right? So the sun and the solar flares and the circumpolar stars and the galactic field, that's the game board for something that's happening within.
Right. It's like a fractal projection of what's really going on inside our own minds.
Exactly. And that's just out there sparking us, challenging us. Wake up, show your hearts, open your chest, find your center. Now is the moment humanity does this together. Well, we can. And I like to show this. I'm going to do a podcast all about water with Allan. I've done it. I've done it on some at some conferences and online interviews. But I really want to do an in-depth one with Allan for the Metaphysical Egypt series. But this is part of this understanding that, you know, the spin in the heavens is the game board, and it's also the potter's wheel. And Ptah is the potter, right, that creates, you know, he falls into form. He's the process of liquid light becoming form as the potter's wheel spins, right? So this, again, it's all metaphors for this same expression. And we came from love. This moment that I just showed you in the last slide, where the chaos stops, this moment is where the next cycle begins with Ipit again in the center at our ecliptic pole. And it starts with the path opener as Anubis, and he's emerging from the pregnant belly of Ipit, right? In the circumpolar stars, we fall through the circumpolar stars into form as the path opener rides the mare, which is the plow, right? It's the Little Dipper. You see it connected to the Big Dipper there, the leg of the bull?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it all happens, and it's in the age of Cancer. We went from Capricorn to Cancer. We've done a couple podcasts speaking about this moment.
Cancer being Kepler, being the beginning.
Exactly, right, exactly. And this mare, this plow that opens a space for water to flow, which is the currency, the plasma that creates our game board as a container of electromagnetism, right? The veil that surrounds the earth and our bodies. That's what's thinning right now, but it's created by this mare, by Anubis, the path opener, riding this plow, which, oh, by the way, means love, which means we literally, you know, we are created from love. Our center is love itself. We've heard this, you know, we hear, you know, hate the word new agey, but, you know, a lot of new agey, they always say, oh, our center is love and we return to love.
All you need is love. Love.
Yeah, the Beatles. You know, they had something there, right?
No, but it's the frequency of creation, correct?
It is, this is our source. This is the one. At one-ment is pure love.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't get any clearer than this for
That's
me.
why it feels so good.
Exactly. And of course, it's also shown by the expression. You see the alpha and omega in the upper right-hand corner?
Mm-hmm.
The omega, the outer container, is Hathor's hair. And the A is the seed.
Mm-hmm.
So the A itself is love. We are seeded with love.
And Hathor's hair, Hathor is the womb.
Is the womb. Which
of
is
creation, the place of creation.
It's the alpha and omega. She is all that is, was, or ever shall be. And the alpha can be both male or female. And we don't know. It's always female until it's born and becomes male or female.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like the egg and the sperm. The sperm carries the XY chromosome. It can turn the egg either male or female.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So the alpha is pure love, pure wisdom. It's the Sophia. It's us. And why the plow? The plow opens the channels for irrigation of the water to flow, right, to spiral out and become our container. But the plow also is the tool used for seeding, right? So this is what it means to be star seeded.
Well, you could say in a way, like our podcast is a mare. It's like a plow. We're opening the way to plant these seeds of knowledge that we're hoping in the years to come will, grow into mighty oaks.
Oh, hallelujah. Definitely. So the story moves on. Horus became the king on earth, while Osiris the king in the realm of the dead, and thus the order of the universe was restored. So Osiris, so many people have written to me over the years and said, "Is Osiris our god?" Well, he's the king of the dead, so I guess we're considered dead in the night cycle. We haven't woken up yet, right? Humanity's awakening. That's when Horus is, well, if you're literally taking this literally, it's all a metaphor, right? We are all Osiris. I've said it 1,000 times. He's the green man. He's the land. He's the axis of the earth. He's us, every single one of us. And in Egypt, when you died, in order to go into the afterlife, you, no matter man or woman, had to become one with Osiris. And then you walk through the gate, right? So we are all the one as the dead Osiris, and we are all going to be resurrected together. This is humanity's resurrection. And thus the order of the universe is restored. Now, through the righteous Isis and Osiris and their son Horus, they keep the patterns going over and over and over again. Set, the god of storms, violence, and hardships, has disappeared, of course, until the next breath. But the funny thing is, when we breathe out again, Set is already free. And when people used to ask Hakim if Set was evil, he'd get a twinkle in his eyes, and he'd look and he'd say, "It depends on which way you're looking." Mm-hmm. And that, what I'm saying is, in the day cycle, Set is free. Set is good. Set is happy. He's pure light, free at last, right?
Well, maybe this is a good opportunity for me to bring this up. I was thinking, I've seen over the years so many people posting things online that say, "Look, Osiris, god of the dead, Anubis, god of the dead. Egyptians were worshiping Satan. This is all Satanism, yada, yada, yada. Set, Satan,
Yeah.
Saturn." All they see is this...
misinformation. And this, again, it's programming, because it's upside down and backwards, isn't it? Because they're basically, when they called it that these gods and the Egyptian religion, it wasn't, it was spirituality. But they say it was all evil and they worship the dead. That is total misunderstanding of what was. And it's again, it's all by design. This is consciousness devolving, and we can believe anything we're told because we're looking outside ourselves for our truths. So we choose a hero, we choose a leader, we choose, whatever your religion, and you choose to go to them to be told who you are and where you came from. And I don't think, what I'm really, I think what both of us are trying to say to people is, no, wake up from that illusion. We don't need someone to be our translator. We have a direct connection. We have it, and it's within. There's nothing out there. That's all the illusion. It's all happening in here. We need to find our center. That's where the grail is. That's what that's what Arthur and his knights were. They were seeking the grail within. You're not going to find it out in the forest. No matter how many dragons you slay, the only way to truth is within.
And it's not a metal cup.
And it's not a metal cup. No, we're not looking for an artifact. They're pretty, nice golden chalices, but anyway, so thus the spirits of Buto and Nekhen became a symbol of the protection of kings in this world and in the afterlife. Order and justice were also linked to Horus. The Nile flood was associated with Isis when the star of Sirius appears, heralding abundant water. Again, life, water is life. Even in the living world, the concept of Osiris conquered, especially through agriculture and peasant community, who was developed into complicated urban communities and finally to the central state. He was the god of fertility and renewal of life. He was symbolized by green and black colors in contrast to the chaos and storms by Set. It's all one. The storms and the chaos and the green and the growth are all one. Two sides of self when you're living, on the current time and space, continuum reality. So what are the spirits of Budo, Pe, and Nekhen? Well, I always love this because I always wanted to know, this is from the ceiling at Dendera as well. You see the images of the Horus, the hawk-headed figures on the right, and then you see like the little Anubis figures on the left. They are the spirits of Budo and Nekhen, but what's even more fascinating is they represent the souls of the ancestors from the pre-dynastic period, meaning they are the highest versions of ourselves. And they're there, again, as protectors in this instance of the cycles of the sun. These are the ones that built the monumental megalithic structures all over the world. They could because they knew how to harness the forces of nature, and they're the ones that left us the symbolism, this liquid language of light, the symbolism that tells our story. And they're here, in a way, this is what's awakening us now. So they have been kind of watching over us. This is us, we are these spirits of Budo and Nekhen. We have those memories within us. And this is why they were worshiping the ancestors at Abydos, because these were the tombs of the ancestors, the ancient ones, the pre-dynastic ones.
Right, the kings before Narmer, who was the first human king.
Exactly. So it's speaking, and here you have images, and again, I'd always seen these in the Egyptian Museum. Again, these are representing the spirits of Budo and Nekhen, but in that position, I'll show you what that means in a moment.
I was
but
just about to ask.
Yeah, I was always wondering, what is this? What and again, when you ask a question, the universe answers. So in a way, we are all followers of Horus, and Horus, these, the followers of Horus were the demigods, and this is who the ancestors were, because they had the ability to harness the currents. And on the right there, you also see these same souls of Nekhen carrying, this is Horus in his form as a hawk-headed human with the double crown on his throne, and in front of him is Horus as the hawk on the royal couch. And what it's representing is they're basically on the birthing boxes, and we've spoken about this before, is it's also a reference to the Ark of the Covenant. This precious moment of complete knowing. As we come back, we hold the seeds of coming back into another cycle. So they are the protectors of the Ark of the Covenant, which is the birthright of humanity, right? We're about to experience all of this again. And here you go, Allan. So this is interesting. That position itself is called Henu, and it represents jubilation, joy, celebrating the rejuvenation of the Ba, or soul, our resurrection. And here's the Henu, same name, bark, and this is where the transformation happens during the moments of silence. So in this bark, you see the image of, it looks like it's sort of like, it's a hawk head. But I always think of,
is that Sokar?
It has a belly. Yeah, it's Sokar, exactly. he is pregnant with this seed of potential. And that's the little hawk head that you see looking out at the bottom.
Right, and we've talked about how he represents no movement, so he has to be pulled on a sled because he's not moving himself.
It's this big, huge nebulous form, right?
Mm-hmm.
Primordial water, basically, right? And the little hawk head peeking out, and it's being dragged into the next cycle. Also a reference to solstices, right? Silent sun. It's always speaking to this, and we experience that twice a year on both the northern and southern hemispheres. So yes, Osiris becomes Sokar, becomes Horus. That's us. We become Sokar. We become one with the primordial waters, holding the seed of the next life in our belly. Wow. That's big. So this contending between Horus and Seth, the conflict between Horus and Seth represents the ancient Egyptian vision of the struggle between good and evil. This is it. This is what everyone talks about, right? Osiris was born in some way or another. Osiris was born to the god Geb and Nut and married, again, this is all metaphor, married his younger sister Isis and the god Atum, the Atom. The father of gods crowned him as king over humans. There we go. Thence his brother Set hated him and killed him and tore his body and scattered the pieces in separate places. Tower of Babel story, separation consciousness. But Isis seeks for him and brings all these pieces, right? And she flaps her wings, right? Magnetic field, to bring him back to life. That's when the magnetic field, we start to spin again, maybe in the opposite direction, right? Right side up and forward, where she becomes pregnant with his son Horus, and thus Osiris became the king of the underworld. Horus, the king of the day cycle, Osiris, the king of the night cycle. Isis had to raise her son secretly in the marshes of the Delta near Buto, far from the eyes of Set and his aides seeking to kill him. This is reflected in the story of Moses and the bulrushes. And when Horus became a young man, he aimed the throne of his father, and thus he entered into a struggle with his uncle for the throne that lasted for 80 years. There are many accounts of this myth, all of which ensures that the victory of Horus over Set was a symbol for the victory of good over evil, and so much more. These are our cycles on Earth, driven by the sun, until the court of gods rolled the right to Horus, and therefore he became the king to whom the kings of Egypt had belonged in their Horus name. So this becomes the ritual of the Hebset festival that we talked about.
Right.
And this is what the kings had to run the labyrinth and do the big reunification ceremonies. This is about coming back for that moment of that near-death experience. And then they're brought back to life through ceremony, the opening of the mouth ceremony with the big tool that was shaped like the Big Dipper. See, they're opening the circumpolar stars for the next breath of life.
Right, it's like the opposite of stopping the spin, the opposite of killing the dragon or the beast. You're reanimating the beast in a way. You're starting the spin again.
This so that we can what? Seed the world with love from the potter's wheel, right? That big circumpolar spin in the heavens. So Osiris then was the king of the underworld, the lord of fertility or eternity, and his creed granted immortality in the fields of bliss to the good only. So, without distinguishing between rich or poor, this belief therefore spread rapidly since the first intermediate period. When this concept was transformed into the rule of the Greeks and the Romans, into the Alexandrian triad, Osir Apis, where we get the Greek Serapis, right? The combination of Osir and Apis, which I always point out the Serapeum, because you can actually see it, with Ser Apis, Serapis. Isis and Horus the child, under the rule of the Greeks and Romans, the Egyptian myth spread with the ships of the sailors and the soldiers and the merchants until it reached Britain and the borders of India to the east. In this period, Horus avenging his father was depicted sometimes as a horseman, which is the model copied in the Christian subject of the saint killing the monster. Same thing. So you see how this migrates over time and space into different versions of the exact same story. And it's all talking about these moments in time, all again powered by solar cycles, galactic cycles. This
Right.
is
The story is the same, but the details change according to the cultural lens.
always. And, you know, I don't want to burst any bubbles, but this is exciting because it's really giving us the patterns to look for and to start to understand so that we can traverse all of these experiences so much easier and with joy, because the outcomes, if you go back to the original stories, the outcomes are positive. They're not the negative stories that we're being told. You know, hell and brimfire, you know, and a God that throws us into hell. That was always the lie. There is no hell. We're living it. If there's a hell, we're there. This is, we make our own. This is the thing. We can make our heaven and hell right now. And all of humanity has an opportunity. Some say an opportunity. Some say we're all going to the better place. Choose to believe whatever you want. You know, we don't have all those answers, but what we can do is point to these ancient understandings from where everything else stems, and they were in a higher state of consciousness and a deeper connection with source than we are now, because we're going to somebody else to tell us who we are.
Right.
So yes, this is a symbol here of the healed eye, right? There's Thoth, and you see Osiris, and then you see the healed eye, the Wadjet eye, right? And that's represented here as the full moon. And we talked about this. I'm going to show you that image on the ceiling at Esna. It's mind-boggling. But this is when we get all our individuated aspects of self, and we come and we form the one Wadjet eye, the full moon, our full expression of self. And it's it's the cat's eye nebula, right? It's coming back to center, our ecliptic pole. The Jed pillar is raised from its 23.5 degree angle, and we're coming home for a moment of bliss. So again, the story is Horus lost his eye during a battle with Seth. It's always Seth, poor guy. The murder of his father Osiris, and the eye called Wadjet was subsequently healed by Thoth. Consciousness, mass consciousness. We all have a part to play in this. And here's that beautiful image. You see the separated fractions of the eye as we fall in separation consciousness.
As phases of the moon.
As phases of the moon, waxing and waning. So we wane into, basically where we're at now. And we're just about to enter the new moon phase, where we take our journey back to that splendid moment of full consciousness. And that's represented by Thoth seated on the throne, holding the Wadjet eye on the full moon. And it's just this beautiful expression. Does it get any clearer than this of what our journey is as we process and process through seasons, annual, daily, day and night cycles, annual cycles, springing into summer, falling into winter, and then this amazing great year of procession when we go through those same 4 seasons, and we're right now about to flip into summer.
The 26,000 year great year.
It's our new moon moment, right? So, and there is that phase where there's no moon, right? That's the moment of silence.
Right. The new moon. That's where we are now, right? Or we're coming into.
We're coming into a full moon. But right now, as our great year, yes, this is where we're coming to that moment.
To the new moon moment.
To the new moon moment. That's exciting. No, we're not going straight from no moon to full moon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what so many people mistakenly believe. But I think it's just as exciting to know that we're suddenly going to see the light of day. We're suddenly going to start to feel who we are again, and we have that chance to grow, to really grow in the sunlight, as beings of light with that awareness, um, and be in a place of heart-based centeredness where we don't believe the lies anymore. No amount of AI programming is going to make me believe in an illusion, because I know in my heart who I am and where I came from.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is big.
Yeah, the programming doesn't work anymore.
It can't. On a person to person basis, on an overall basis, and we'll never need anyone to define or translate scriptures for us anymore, because we have it all. We have that knowing in our hearts. This is exciting. So yeah, it's a journey through the waters of perception. That's exactly what this is expressing. Um, and this is fascinating. I read this paper, and it speaks about this 18th dynasty Theban tomb. And I didn't want to include all of it here, but it keeps talking about it is the custom to accept the eye of Horus. So this is basically sort of like funeral rites, in this, on the walls of this tomb. And I'm just giving you images of sort of what they're talking about, but it's all about a symbol of hope and protection, reunification. When it says, it's the custom to accept the eye of Horus, it's basically saying that we choose to go back to oneness so that we can be reborn again. And so it included funeral rituals for offerings of bread, onions, beef, poultry, drinks, and more. And I believe this also speaks to those earlier Hebset festivals where they were taking the offerings of the breads from all the different districts, and that
Mm-hmm.
sort of the body of Osiris, and of course the blood of Osiris, which is originating, which then goes on to become the rituals, the early rituals of the Hebrews, and then the Christian communion,
Mm-hmm.
where so many of us never understood in church that when they said, take the bread, we didn't know why we were taking the bread and drinking the wine,
Yeah.
and what, the body of Christ. What are they talking about?
Right.
But
It's not cannibalism.
no, none of it made sense to me. Even, I took cataclysm and all those things, and but these speak to this ancient knowing that it's we are the land, we are the people, we are all of this. And when we take that bread, we take, we're actually taking it to reunite, as one, to come back into that fullness. And that makes it such a more powerful experience when you know why you're doing something. And then this grows into funeral rituals when people are bringing offerings for their dead relatives. And again, that doesn't make any sense logically, but if you understand where that comes from, it becomes something different. It's literally about, it's a metaphor for sustaining and nurturing them as they move into this next beautiful phase
Mm-hmm.
in the afterlife. So it's really all about the cycles within and without. That's what it's all about. It's not about all the little things. It's not about becoming priestesses and gurus. It's not about rituals. We don't have to perform any rituals. The rituals embody this ancient knowing. This is the thing. We need to literally figure out, transliterate what these rituals were. Figure it out, because it contains the secrets of the journey of perception that we are on. We can perform rituals, but rituals are so much more powerful when you're the creator of them.
That's so interesting because in our modern thinking of prayer, it's like you're asking something outside of yourself to give you something rather than performing these rituals like you were saying. It's all about internalizing the whole process, finding it within yourself rather than
Exactly.
demanding it from some outside deity to give it to you because you've been good.
And yeah, or bringing you know, you're giving away your gold or your favorite piece of jewelry, so you're going to buy your way into heaven. And
Mm.
this is why so many people think they can just, you know, give people money and they're going to get their, you know, their 24 virgins or their golden key to open the gates of heaven. And it doesn't work that way. You know, it's an inner journey. It's about being clear and cognizant of your choices. You know,
You know what?
I
It's so funny. Before we started, I was thinking randomly about Martin Luther nailing his thesis to the cathedral wall, and now we're talking about, selling of indulgences and all the rest of it. Incredible.
And Edgar Casey said it best. You know, and I read this in one of his books. You only get to heaven on the hand of someone you've helped, and it's someone you've helped without any promises. This
Mm-hmm.
this is the important thing, you know. And it can be, you know, the whole idea is: are you making positive, good choices in any given moment with any expression of life? And that can be the lowly spider to the, you know, to you know, the starving cats and dogs on the street, to, you know, people that can't, you know. And again, we're always struck with, you know, we have the beggars on the streets, that it's created, you know, they're actually forming these groups to rip people off. So we always have to question, is this real or isn't? This is the chaos that we live in. So it's going within and determining in your heart, does it matter why this person is hungry? Does it matter? You know, if we're always in judgment, you know, we're judging ourselves. This is really the key, because everything is a mirror of yourself. Um, and we certainly don't want to take the time to explain exactly what that means, but we are co-creators, and if we're creating beautiful and peace and sharing and, you know, energy, you know, money is energy. You know, having possessions and things are the things that really sometimes become your prison. It's the funniest thing. If we hoard, we're not growing. But if we're letting things flow, it's amazing how much keeps flowing towards you. You know, it's developing patterns in your life that sustain and nurture you and allow you to help and sustain and nurture everything outside yourself.
Hmm.
If that makes any sense. Um, and I'm sure it doesn't. But we're going to do podcasts on the things that we're taught and how to how to heal yourselves, and in so doing help to heal everyone else. Every decision, every thought is a ripple that goes out into the world and makes a difference. And every choice you make makes a difference.
But it seems to be all based on self-respect in a way. You can't do good for others if you don't have any respect for yourself
You don't love yourself.
to begin with.
We start by judging ourselves. What we judge in others is almost always what we judge most harshly within ourselves.
Which is why you were talking about us being mirrors of each other. And this is even on the ceiling of Dendera and other temples, where it's showing us that you are a mirror of me and I'm a mirror of you. And we are all basically the same consciousness experiencing itself in different ways, but we see different aspects of ourselves in the others around us, good or bad.
This is exactly right. The ancients would play with us in a way. They all knew they were Hathor, they were Sekhmet, they were Osiris. You know, we are Set. We are all of those aspects, not just one. Right? We have all those aspects within us, and we can utilize what they represent in any given moment in time. Especially in this dynamic when we have so many challenges. There are days I need to be Sekhmet. There are days I need to be Hathor. You know, there is just so much energy running with us, within us, and through us, and we're interacting with it. And to utilize and understand what the netters represent. I mean, it's a game, but you know, we don't need tools. but I think the way that they understood the forces of nature, you don't have to name it, you don't have to, look to an archetypal energy. You can just look at the forces of nature and how it moves in sync, like the mycelium. My
Hmm.
gosh, how nature saves each tree and plant in the forest. They all come together to nurture and sustain each other. And I think that's really the ticket. This is kind of the root of what I'm talking about. Is this when we do this, this is what will start to usher in this new beginning. Instead of thinking, we have been programmed. It's not our fault, but in a way, we're almost programmed to think of ourselves first. How does my choice affect me? Is it, if I tell, my friend to do this, is it going to affect me in a positive way? Or if I tell her she should do that, will that affect me? And I'm just putting ideas out there when, it's almost like it's become a second nature to put everything back into the ego. And when we eliminate that aspect and we just think of what's for the betterment of everybody, then everything changes. It's literally going to the roots of our consciousness and changing the way we think. Removing all those core beliefs, most of which, if not all, were false, and rebuilding ourselves into something that we can feel, like you said, that self-confidence is so powerful. To know that you're walking in integrity and authenticity, and to be cognizant in everything. I keep using that word, but it's so important to be cognizant of who you are with every choice you make. And it starts to change your life. And as you change, that's when the miracles happen.
Hmm.
Um, and this is beautiful. This is from Emily Jennings, and she says, solar flare is about to shift the collective consciousness. Get ready for something unprecedented to happen. Well, not necessarily unprecedented, but it's been 24,000 years since we were here before. Um, Consciousness as a whole is about to go through, if you believe in time and space, sorry, my mind just keeps spinning. Anyway, consciousness as a whole is about to go through a novel process of healing and change. The funny thing about consciousness is that we're in it. We have no way of stepping outside to see how it's doing. We may not feel a distinct change in the whole collective because we don't know what it feels like to not be changing with it. Consciousness is always evolving. It's dynamic, but as parts of it, we don't know how it feels to be dynamic. Being a dynamic entity feels static to us. We can't experience shifts a lot of the time because we're shifting with it, and it may feel like a normal Tuesday to us. So basically, she's convoluting into basically telling us that, sometimes we're not aware because we're not trained to be aware of what's actually happening. We feel anxious, we feel joyful, we feel, sad, but we don't know why. And it's all of us are shifting because of this solar activity. It's literally has us. I think Allan and I, we were just talking about it this week. One day I was feeling really great. The next day I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this work. It doesn't make a difference. And then, the next day it's like, oh, wow, I just had this amazing, and it seems to be happening like that roller coaster sped up, on steroids or something. It's just been crazy with all this solar activity the past week or so. But she goes on to say, but this time it's going to be huge. It's unprecedented. Well, again, I bear to differ, but we may see even physical effects of this shift. Electricity might break down, and the energy of all kinds. The energy within us might flicker or surge. Our hearts are like little suns. Our chakras are little suns. The electromagnetic field inside each of us may feel the reverberations of the giant sun we revolve around. Get ready for anything to happen. I think we're just about there now with some of the events of the past, 4 or 5 years, when life, suddenly became almost surreal. and our world was literally turned upside down. We found ourselves isolated and wearing masks and all kinds of crazy things. We have these crazy, elections happening. We have all these, so many things that don't seem to make sense. And this is the world going through major growing pains, in my opinion. It's, I know there have been times on the planet when things get crazy, and again, these things are cyclical. But yeah, I think we need to embrace change. We have to embrace that, what we hope, and we all are seeking. How many people are saying, "Oh, I just want to go back to the way it was before the pandemic." Everything was normal. Well, if we really went back, we'd remember it really wasn't normal. Whatever normal is. But it was more normal than it is now, maybe. But what I'm saying is it's time to embrace change. It's time to learn to go with the flow, in a positive way, not necessarily let things happen without participating, but not to be thrown off your course or thrown off your game because an event happens that sort of stops whatever you were planning in motion. If we learn to bounce back and continually be able to change our path and direction, and yet stay focused, I think we'll be a lot healthier and more successful as this begins to unfold in front of us. I want to go through this quickly, but I think this speaks to a lot of what we've been talking about, and this is all part of the Papyrus of Ani, and it's speaking about this moment, and I just find it fascinating. It's from chapter 17 of the Book of the Dead, on the Papyrus of Ani. But if a man speaks this chapter when in a state of purity, it means going forth after death into the day. This is what we're talking about. And assuming whatever shape he desires. As for anyone who shall read it daily for his own benefit, it means being hell on earth. Not sure what that, I don't think they mean hell. He shall come forth from every fire, and nothing evil shall reach him. It is a matter 1,000,000 times true. I have seen it, and it is indeed come to pass through me. Wow. So it's challenging us to be as pure as we can, to be as authentic as we can, to be in integrity, no matter what's happening out there. So part of this spell reads, all the evil which was on me has been removed. This is this moment. What does that mean? It means that I was cleansed on the day of my birth in the two great and noble marshes, which are in Heracleopolis, on the day when the common folk make offerings to the great God who is therein. What are they? Eternity is the name of one. Great Green is the name of the other. They're speaking of eternity is the primordial waters, the pure consciousness of the primordial waters. The Great Green is basically Dwaj, Wajwer, sorry, not Dwaj, Wajwer, which is the Great Green, the currency that is life on Earth, right, in this night cycle. So we have, the purity of the primordial waters versus the waters of the Great Green Earth, right? They are the lake of Natron and the lake of Ma'at, pure balance, purity, and the lake of Natron, salt. Ionic energy, plasma, waters, frequency. Otherwise said, eternity governs is the name of one. Great Green is the name of the other. Otherwise said, seed of eternity is the name of one. Great Green is the name of the other. Seed of eternity. As for that great God who is therein, he is Ra himself. The sun. Crimes are removed. Evils destroyed. What does it mean? It means that the navel cord of the Osiris N has been cut. All of the evil of it has been removed. What does it mean? The Osiris N is purified on the day of his birth in the two great and mighty lakes, which are in Hennesut on the day the populace offers to the great god who is in it. What does it mean? Guide of millions is the name of one. Great green is the name of the other. These are the two waters. It is the lake of Natron and it is the lake of what is right. Begetter of millions is the name of one. Great green is the name of the other. And as for the great god mentioned who is in it, it is Ra himself. Isn't it just fascinating, the language they use to speak to this? And this, again, from chapter 17, book of Eden. Mine is yesterday, I know tomorrow, is followed by the gloss or explanation, yesterday is Osiris, tomorrow is Ra. They're basically saying yesterday is the night cycle, the earth cycle, tomorrow is eternity, it's the day cycle. So they're speaking again of these two moments. And above, this is from that papyrus of Eni, you see the Aker, which is that portal between the two worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at these two different, yesterday and tomorrow, and the now moment that's in between.
So you're talking about the two cat figures, yesterday and tomorrow, the lions.
Yes, the two lions. That's the Aker, and you see Newt. That bar of Pet is Newt,
the sky,
and the earth below, which are these two great bodies of water. Again, all speaking to the things that we've been talking about here, and this comes from Tessie Mills, and I just love it. She says, as the sun dips below the horizon, marking an end, it promises a new beginning the very next day. These sunsets have whispered lessons of resilience and hope to me. They've shown that even after the darkest night, there is a dawn awaiting. The cyclical dance of nature, of endings and beginnings, is a profound metaphor for life's challenges and triumphs. So we're at the challenging part, but the triumph is coming. The sun always rises, and this is the backbone of all the mythology of Egypt. No matter how dark it gets, no matter how you want to get out of here and never live on Earth again, when we see the light, and we're still on Earth, in an Earth-based perception of reality, whatever that's titled, certainly wouldn't be Kemet, it's a whole different expression of beingness. So it's something to look forward to. So I say enjoy the ride. Release the need for certainty. Relax into the moment and let the universe do the driving. If there was a secret to happiness in life, I'd say that was it. And again, be cognizant with your choices. This comes from an analytical comparative study of the two main cult centers of the god Osiris, which were Abydos, and Jeddu. Osiris enjoyed a great popularity because all deities underwent a form of death and regeneration, but not in the dramatic way that Osiris experienced. And again, Osiris is us, right? The earth. Everyone starting from the Middle Kingdom, including even deities, were promised renewed life after death through ritual identification with Osiris. There were many cult centers for Osiris, but the two most commonly mentioned in religious texts were, of course, Abydos, Abju, and Busiris, Jeddu, and they were even occasionally linked together. These two cult centers were located, one in the north, Delta, Jeddu, and the other one in the south, Abju, and they were mentioned in the Pyramidic Coffin text. They had fixed festivals, both in the end of the season of the inundation. Both cult centers had original gods before the arrival of Osiris, Kente Imentu in Abju, and Andeti in Jeddu, the first related to death and the second related to rebirth. So even the land spoke about these moments of birth, death and rebirth, which again I find fascinating. And this, we've seen this before. This is the the fetish of Osiris on this bark. It's at Abydos, and it's basically representing the moment of silence when Osiris is moving from, between the two worlds, basically, again referring to this Ark of the Covenant. And it's the pause, the moment of silence. And it's celebrated by a festival at Abydos, which was held during the month of Zodiac, in the fourth month of the inundation. And it was the celebration of the resurrection of Osiris. It lasted for 3 days. And the timing may have allowed a lot of people to travel since it was an inactive period for agriculture. It coincided with the parallel festival of the god Ptah, Silk, or Osiris, the moment of silence, held in Memphis at the same time. The main component of this festival was the procession in which the cult statue of Osiris was put in a sacred boat called the Nesmet boat, carried by the priest from his temple to his tomb at Peker, located in El-Kab, and this is all at the site of Abydos. Now, we're going to do a podcast on Abydos and the Osirian and how it all relates to this incredible resurrection ritual. It's really powerful, very, very ancient. The Osirian is a pre-dynastic structure, and all built around this concept of the resurrection and rebirth after a cyclical moment of silence. Yeah, this is a wonderful picture. I took it from, it was I think it might have been a box or a big stela at the Egyptian Museum. Unfortunately, I didn't name the picture, but it's the ferryman, and he's carrying. I've shown you the ferryman before, which was just from the clean ceiling at Dendera on the second floor in one of the Osiris chambers. But this is an even better picture where you see the ferryman who basically carries the soul of the Akh, the light body, across, the river Styx, basically, across those waters into the afterlife, into the next cycle. In a way, I think it's sort of relating to this moment when we go through the pool of fire, the digestion of the physical, and into a whole new perception of reality.
Like Sokar.
Exactly.
Being
and you
pulled
see
on
that,
the bark.
when you see the little bird in the front, you don't see his legs.
Yeah, he's a bit like the head of Sokar popping out.
Well, it is. This is exactly what it represents. He can't wait to get to the other side to be reborn again. Wow. This is about us, folks. This is us. Huge. This is the emergence of Nefer Ubenef from the tomb in the daylight. So coming out of the tomb, the night cycle, death, right? The earth-based cycle, and into the light. We start off as the shadow of ourselves, right? But we are in the sunlight now. We're coming out into the day, coming forth by day, and starting our rise. And here we talked a little bit about this in one of the recent podcasts. We see Whippawat, again, revered at Abydos, and he's riding the Uraeus, right? And the Uraeus is the Kundalini. He's the opener of ways, for us to come back into our at this point, light bodies. There were two outward processions, the procession of Whippawat and the great procession of Osiris. And Whippawat was who is depicted as a gray-headed wolf and was represented on one of the 4 official standards of the pharaohs, guided by his followers into battle. Whippawat was associated like Anubis with escorting the newly dead to the halls of judgment, both dog gods. And remember, that idea of the halls of judgment is the game of the priest that comes later.
Mm-hmm.
This was never understood as anything that your soul is about to be judged. The judgment is always self-judgment. That's why I say be clear, be aware of your thoughts and choices, because we have these moments now when we have a chance to really choose in positive ways for ourselves, to find our clarity, find our authenticity. The symbol of Osiris at Abydos was a pool covered with a animal skin with 2 plumes, which is associated with Anubis. I show that at the far left. It's just interesting because people ask me what that is all the time. See this animal skin, and the pole, and the lotus flower kind of doing the Kundalini dance up the pole. Um, and underneath Whipplewat here and the spiral that he's, on the standard, you see the royal placenta, right? From the afterbirth, which I just find interesting. This that we know is so positive for nurturing and healing. And again, we see this idea. This is the fetish of Osiris. It's the upright pillar facing the ecliptic pole, if you will. And it's Whipplewat's riding this current back to center. And here it's on the interior of a coffin with the two jackals facing center, and it is the pole of Osiris. So the two path openers are both bringing us back to center. The two sides of ourself are coming back to our center, which is huge. Now, you and I, Allan, remember in 2020, October 2020, we went to the Met, and we saw Nefer's sarcophagus, one of my favorite depictions. It's so beautiful. And he was a priest of the Netertzmut, Nebhet, Sekhmet, Ninth, and Satet. But the lid shows images and text relating to the sun's journey through the sky during the day as a metaphor for the journey from death to life that one would take while accompanying the sun. See, the sun is what drives everything. Nude as the heavens is seen arched over the rounded earth and is supported by Shu, the atmosphere. And at Nut's feet is Geb, who represents earth. And let's just keep going, because if you look closely, here we see the two jackals coming back to center. And the two waters, right?
Right.
Also becomes a sign for Aquarius, right? Coming back to center. And at the bottom, you see the eye. Do you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Where Geb is. So the one eye, this is that moment of silence, right? And it gets better, right? This is so cool. You see the winged solar disk. And then look closely, because within this globe, which is the Earth.
Wow. It's the same thing.
The upside down and backwards. See the figure laid out on top of the stars? That's the day cycle. See underneath, there's no stars. We're upside down.
Wow.
It's all there. It's just so incredible. And when you see it everywhere, here is Geb, this is basically the Ka position of the hands, life force. That's Earth. And this is that little figure of Geb, and then Shu's up on top in this atmosphere. This Ka is in the square position because that's Earth-based, and then everything then turns round because that's the heavens. It's day and night cycles. Left brain, right brain consciousness. We do have heaven on Earth. See, it's all in the Earth globe. And we have stars. This is our day cycle when we experience the space in between the forms.
That's it. It's showing us the space in between.
And it's showing us, exactly. Isn't this so incredible? So it's all here. So again, we're looking at a resurrection scene. The resurrection from the dead, the Jed, right? And we see, here's the Aten over Osiris on his back. And we see the mound, primordial mound. But the resurrection occurs on top. And I'm going to show you when we do the Abydos one of the Osirian, that we're actually looking at this is the platform of the Osirian, and this is what's underneath, the two stairways going down.
Oh.
It's big. That's the resurrection platform.
Oh.
This is big stuff, folks. I have so much good stuff ahead. So yeah, the procession of Osiris included the performance of a ritual drama exemplifying the sufferings, death, and resurrection of Osiris. Why would they do this? Why was this a pilgrimage site? Why did they do this annually? to remind us of this pattern, this cycle. It was thought that the sun completed its daily course at Abydos and entered the underworld through a gap in the nearby mountains, representing a doorway for the souls of the dead to enter the upper world, following the sun example at Abydos. This when the sun rises, right? The stela offered by the people who came on journeys to attend the festival were concentrated near the western entrance of the temple in an area of high ground known as the Terrace of the Great God. This is big. I cannot tell you. It's a powerful journey through the Lion's Gate. Akar Rudi was the embodiment of the concept of the one horizon, or rising, between the eastern and western horizons, representing Dwaj and Sefer, yesterday and tomorrow. In this depiction, Ra Harakti as Ra, who is Horus of the horizons, the alignment, is riding the cobra on his path between the rising and setting sun. The cobra is the Kundalini energy of humanity. He sits here in alignment with the now moment, a moment of silence between the rising and setting sun. See the atom?
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the symbol for time, eternal time.
Right, there's those two H symbols again.
Exactly. It's everywhere. He sits here again, okay. He rides the cobra, representing on one level our Kundalini rising and falling. When we master and transmute our polarity, we become one with the divine and enjoy moments of total bliss and universal knowing. This is what we're talking about. And this was interesting because they discovered these mysterious chambers inside the sacred wadi at Abydos. And this is that V, right, that they were talking about, that wadi, that sacred wadi.
Where the sun sets?
Right, it's right behind the temples, right? And that's where the sun rises. That's the valley, that's the V, that's Venus, Vega, that's the vulva, that's the womb that gives birth to the rising sun, right? It's so beautiful. It's the Akar. It's
wow.
all connected.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I see it.
And so this is some of the chambers they found. It's a view from the inside of one of those chambers. And view of the early Egyptian road to the afterlife from inside this newly discovered rock-cut chamber above this sacred wadi in Abydos. This is big stuff. There are the openings of these chambers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more to this. There's so much more to this. So this V is called Kab, mother of pots, right? And why pots? It's because there's all these pots, because this is where the royal cemetery was for the early dynastic and pre-dynastic rulers, kings, ancestors. This is where the ancestors are buried, this sacred place. And these people that are from Abydos archaeology that worked on this project said perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the discovery is the regular association between the cliff chambers and natural water tunnels and major cracks in the bedrock. Some of the chambers follow and integrate water tunnels, which then open into the chamber from the rear wall, much deeper in the bedrock. The chambers are arranged in the cliff face well above, but overlooking deep vertical shafts. These shafts go down. I was in an old Coptic church, and they weren't supposed to let me, but the monk let me go back into a chamber that's only for men and look down a well that he said led down to shafts and tunnels, one of which led to one of these chambers in the mountains. Huh. Churches are always over old sacred places and almost always have tunnels and underground chambers. This is big, and this is all over the world. They find it in Peru, and everywhere in the world. I'm not going to name everywhere. So yeah, this is big stuff. So the association between the chambers, the shafts, and these natural geological features may give particular significance to their presence inside this wadi, uniquely sacred among the desert canyons that skirt the western edge of Abydos. This again is a picture from inside one of those chambers. So, do you need proof you have a soul? This is an interesting thing that I caught again on social media. It came from a man named Bill Sobel. And he talks about this Stargate project, which was a secret U.S. Army unit established in 1978 at Fort Meade, Maryland, by the Defense Intelligence Agency and the SRI International to investigate the potential for psychic phenomena in military and domestic intelligence applications. On another site, he said his father was part of this project. And he says the below is from the report on the project Stargate. In addition to this, there was known physics regarding your soul. DNA is a quantum fractal antenna, and all DNA emits and absorbs biophotons, UV light. And that's how your higher self and its vessel, your body, connect when your brain's default mode network, called your ego, right? Your id, your ego, your default network steps out of the way. So what it's saying again, your DNA is basically an antenna for these biophotons, liquid light, right? Which we have the ability to connect with if we let go of our ego and transmute our polarity. And this was found by this study. So consciousness and perspective, or I'd say when the veil is lifted, he goes on to say, having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality and interact with other intelligences and other dimensions within the universe, and that it is both eternal and destined for ultimate return to the absolute, right? The one, the source, the primordial waters, we are faced with the question, so what happens then? Since memory is a function of consciousness and therefore enjoys the same eternal character as the consciousness which accounts for its existence, it must be admitted that when consciousness returns to the absolute, it brings with it all the memories it has accumulated through basically all of its experience in reality, in its existence, in all its many forms. So we forget right now because we're born into the veil, the magnetic field, but we will have memory of everything we've ever experienced, all our selves, all our incarnations, if that's what you want to call it, that we're all happening at once, basically. All your expressions, you will have memory of your journey on this game board. And
so memories of past lives are not actually wiped away. We do have access to that.
Well, this was our journey. We came here to experience life. Why would they take all of that memory away? And it's interesting that they have tools or a way of possibly measuring that. Now, I can't say any of this is real or not, but it does feel what I'd already imagined to be true. And I just think it's interesting. And it also speaks to the definition of what the Ba was to the ancient Egyptians. That's why I have these two images of the Ba flying over this, because the Ba was what was able to separate from the body at death. In other words, once you die, the Ba was literally able to go back and forth between this realm and the realm you just came from, which I find fascinating. When you see that image of Nefertari playing chess, that's in her tomb after she's already passed, and it's speaking. She's playing chess. She's trying to get to the point where she earns the right to send her Ba back to see how her loved ones are doing. So traversing, the two forms of reality. The two worlds, going between the two worlds. And this is basically what he's talking about here. That ability to do that once you allow yourself to forget about your ego, forget about yourself. Is it going to be good or bad for me? Let go of that and connect with your higher self. We have that ability. It's within our DNA. It's our own egos that are getting in the way, right? And that makes perfect sense to me. So here we go. This is what we all really want to know, right? So the return of consciousness to the absolute does not imply an extinction of the separate entity, which the consciousness organized and sustained in reality. Rather, it suggests a differentiated consciousness which merges with and participates in the universal consciousness and infinity of the absolute without losing the separate identity and accumulated self-knowledge, which its memories confer upon it. And you might laugh, but I used to think about this all the time when I was young. It's like, okay, everybody says we merge with God, but do we lose? Am I going to lose who I am? You know, all of the everything I've experienced, am I going to lose the ultimate me, which is the ego, right? And what it's basically saying here is we lose the ego, which is our, you know, our emotional self, really. And we experience the knowledge of that self from the outside looking in as, you know, a non-emotional aspect of ourselves, remembering, wow, I did that and I did that. And what did I learn from it? You know, it's like looking from above instead of experiencing it with all the wounds and all the emotions and all the hurts or joys of having lived that experience. Did that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So what it does lose is the capability for generation of independent thought holograms, since that can only be done by energy and motion. In other words, it retains the power to perceive, but loses the power of will or choice. In exchange, however, this consciousness participates in the all-knowing infinite continuum of consciousness, which is a characteristic of energy in the ever-present moment, right? The now moment. This is what we've talked about with that moment of, you know, that silent moment when we're just in the primordial waters of consciousness and we know everything, that moment of bliss of being connected to every cell in the universe. And then, boom, we're back out again, whether we come back here or we go forward. Consequently, it is accurate to observe that when a person experiences the out-of-body state, he is in fact projecting that eternal spark of consciousness and memory, which constitutes the ultimate source of his identity, to let it play in and learn from dimensions both inside and outside the time-space world in which his physical component currently enjoys a short period of reality. And that again is something I experienced when I had all, you know, my many years of experience with astral projection. I used to remember going back in time and forward into, you know, other planets, and I would question the reality of that. But it does as I did it more and more, it made more sense that I was leaving this, you know, restricted world, this earth-based reality when we're stuck on this time-space continuum, and going to a place where all bets were off, and I was creating it in a way as I went. Just fascinating. But what I'm really trying to say is, you know, we're just going to reverse our perspective and rise. You know, we're gonna, you know, we cross over. People leave this expression all the time. We lose our loved ones. We wonder where they are. And yes, you know, are they going through this experience? You know, we can't say for sure, but we have so much material and so many interactions. People have had interactions with their loved ones.
You mean people who have already died? You're saying, are they going
Yeah,
to go through
exactly.
this?
Because in a way, are we talking about this one moment when it all happens? I've heard thoughts where, you know, these people that are crossing over are in a kind of purgatory, not heaven or hell, but in a waiting period for all of us to go into this moment. And I've heard, you know, that anything can happen in any given moment, or you go on and live another life, or, you know, and in cycles and cycles and cycles. And then suddenly there is a big moment when all the cycles reach midnight or 6 o'clock and we all begin again. And I believe, you know, every 12,000 years we have one of those moments when this is, you know, the turning of the clock for all the cycles. And we're all going to leave this reality and move into the day cycle where we, you know, we begin the climb.
Coming out of Plato's cave,
Right, reverse our
as it were.
perspective, and come out into the daylight, and wow, it's a whole new ball game. And I think we're all ready for that. I really do. I know I am. Um, and I just bring this back. I think we showed this once before, but we see this on the ceiling at Dendera. I'm not going to go into any details, but they show how we do not take a linear path around this journey, that we actually have to do, in this structure on the ceiling of Dendera, on the two corners of the room. It shows us through the symbolism that we actually, if we want to walk the cycles, we actually have to walk in a pattern of the figure 8. And we're always crossing in the center, which is our moment of silence every 12,000 years, if you're looking at it from the ages of a great year. And it's rather fascinating. And that symbol of the winged Kepler is right here in the age of Leo.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the age that Abdel Hakim Alian said, this is next stop. This is the next stop in the cycle. And here we are moving into Aquarius. So the only way is to take this catty-cornered walk across to Leo. And as I said, we're looking up. Aquarius is rising on the horizon in the northern hemisphere, but if you're looking down in the southern hemisphere, Leo is rising on.
Right, Aquarius and Leo are opposite signs, fixed. You can think of them as 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So the only way to go from Aquarius to Leo is to flip our perspective.
That's the golden. That's the golden and the silver keys, the cross keys, the emblem, one of the emblems of the Vatican. We see it everywhere, and this is the key that opens the golden gate to our day cycle.
And Sekhmet herself, who is half human Aquarius, half Leo lion,
Yep, she represents that moment. Sekhmet is roaring. This is our moment. It's exciting. And in the center, we see a line of in the center on the ceiling, between the two sides of the ceiling, we see this whole panel, and we always call that the Stargate, center of the temple. It's that center between the two polarities. And on the top, you see the winged sun disk, and in between it, you see the vulture. And the vulture represents digestion of the physical. And that will always happen at your center. When you transmute your polarity, you come back to center. And the two newts, or Mut and Newt, represent the two waters as well. And again, we're in Aquarius, and there is the two waters as Aquarius. And we see it again at the Philae, and he's in Plato's cave, basically. He's in the Ouroboros, showing us these eternal cycles, and he's dumping the two waters. And the Nile flood didn't happen in the month of February. It happened in the summer, so we're talking about a much greater cycle, which is the great year. So these are the cosmic and earthly waters, and we're going to walk between these portals, and the day cycle is heaven on earth. And we will go through the lake of fire, which is to digest and refresh, to be reborn again. The lake of fire is a concept that appears in both ancient Egyptian and Christian religions. In ancient Egypt, it appears as an obstacle on the journey through the underworld, which can destroy or refresh the deceased. And I'm going to say again, Game of the Priests, they talk about it in a possible negative way, but it's really a lake for digesting the physical perception of reality. Fire represents digestion. And of course, the baboons are heart-centered consciousness. So when we go back to heart-centered consciousness, we have no need for the illusion of form. So in Christianity, it is a place of after-death punishment of the wicked. So you see how things get twisted and changed to promote agendas. If I'm afraid, I'll do whatever the priest tells me to do. Or if I don't, I'm going to live with the belief that I'm going to hell, so I'll be evil anyway. What the heck? I already stole from my brother, right? What the heck? I already stole from my boss. You feel like every bad thing you do is a death sentence. It's a punishment. It's, you're going to end up in a fiery hell. And there is no fiery hell, and I can't say that loudly. Our hell is being lived on earth by all the guilt and the shame we feel because we've been taught to believe this. Yes, it's wrong. There's no doubt about it. And we build our self-esteem and we learn to love ourselves by making positive choices. That should and could have been the lesson. That we can't be motivated through fear because that has the opposite effect. And so this is a beautiful symbol. I think this is the last slide, finally. Sorry, guys. But it's a beautiful depiction for what's coming next. And it is the next part of the cycle. This is Leo and Virgo. When we reverse our perspective and direction, we are then moving into and precessing into Virgo.
Right, because if you think about it, when we move into Aquarius, the beginning of Aquarius, its opposite is the end of Leo. So if we go from the beginning of Aquarius to the end of Leo, what we're really doing is going from Pisces to Aquarius to Leo into the age of Virgo.
That's right, Virgo, Isis. This is Isis, and in front of her is Sirius, right?
And
so
she's the virgin pregnant
exactly
with the new Horus.
With the new seed, right? Which we showed at the beginning is actually, the new Horus is actually Nefertum, harmony of the atom.
And that comes in the age of Libra.
Well, the balance comes in the age of when we really find our inner balance. And then Scorpio is the true digestion of the physical, and Ophiuchus represents the portal back to the center of the galaxy.
Oh, right, the 13th sign in between Scorpio and Sagittarius.
That's when we move completely from form into formless, zoom through Sagittarius, and Capricorn is unified seed of consciousness, and that's when we go to Cancer again.
Okay, sorry to get ahead of you.
You're quick. But what's interesting here is you see Sirius, represented by the dog, is not following Osiris anymore, right?
Oh.
Sirius followed Osiris, even on the Fool in the deck, the tarot deck.
And now he's leading.
Now, Sirius as the Sophia, wisdom of the heart, is leading the way. And it's the day cycle. So the reversal and the revival. And this comes from Philip Lindsay. He's a really famous astrologer. But he says the influences of Sirius, 3 in number, are focused in Regulus, the star of the first magnitude, which is frequently called the heart of the lion. We've talked about this before.
Right.
This conjunction between, and this is why the Lion's Gate, folks, and why we see lions everywhere in the world representing currency, powerful lines of fertility and currency, all representing, this heart of the lion on earth. But anyway, this conjunction between Venus and Mercury spanning 2 signs is a reminder of the mystery of the Sphinx. Esoterically, the Sphinx is regarded as the one zodiac sign, Leo, Virgo, the body of a lion with the face of the Virgin. Virgo and Leo together stand for the whole man, for the God-man, as well as for the spirit matter, when the nature of the world is revealed and the mystery of the Sphinx will no longer exist. Whew. That's what we're talking about. So this is a great place to end for today. It's been a long podcast, but there's just so much we wanted to share. And wow. Until the next time.
Oh, indeed. Thank you so much, Patricia. Everybody, you can check out our website, horusrising.com, and we will be back very soon with another episode. Thanks.
Thanks, Allan.